Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin momentarily. Please welcome to the stage the Atlantic's Margaret Lowe.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is wonderful to see such a packed house on this chilly November morning. I hope everybody had their fill of avocado toast and coffee. I'm Margaret Lowe. I'm president of AtlanticLIVE, and we are the team that brings the Atlantic's journalism to life on stages across the country. And we are so happy to be here in New York City for a day called Power of Purpose. It is a very timely conversation about businesses becoming a force for good. Just some context. It's been almost 50 years since the economist Milton Friedman wrote in the New York Times that there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to increase its profits. His decree that stockholders come first has been really the prevailing philosophy in most corporate boardrooms, but it's clear that there has been an unmistakable shift. More and more companies are using the power of their brands to speak out about guns, the environment, workplace inclusion, creating a more equitable world. The list now goes on and on. And this trend was underscored last summer when the Business Roundtable, made up of CEOs from the country's leading companies, said that maximizing shareholder profits should not be the only goal of corporations. So today we'll explore the new landscape with business leaders taking a stand and making decisions about everything from philanthropy to sustainability and political advocacy. And we're going to talk about what works, and we're going to talk about what doesn't. Before we begin, I want to say an important thank you, and that is to our underwriters. Today would not be possible without them, and I want to say, take a moment to thank them. And they are Wells Fargo, Nestle Waters, ServiceNow, the Cognizant U.S. Foundation, and McKinsey & Company. Please give them a round of applause with me. And to kick us off, I'm delighted to welcome McKinsey's Liz Hilton-Siegel here to share a few remarks. Liz?
Good morning. Thank you. I have to apologize that I, like many of you in the room, have one of those fall colds. So you'll find me from time to time with a cough drop, which is better than the coughing attack that happens when I don't have the cough drop. So I am sorry for that. I'm really thrilled to be here, cold or not. Over the last year, I have personally had more conversations on the topic of purpose than I think I'd had in my previous 48 years. Yesterday, just for all of you know, was my 49th birthday, so that's about what there was. And I think that while this year may have been particularly true for me in my life and at McKinsey, I am sure it will be true for all of us and for all companies over the years to come. I couldn't help myself but decide to look up the definition of purpose. When you get into a conversation with a bunch of McKinsey people about purpose, you find quickly you're on many different topics, and people have very, very different definitions of what they think the concept of purpose means. I'm sure this is something that you all will talk about quite a lot today. But the actual definition of purpose from the dictionary reads, to have as one's intention or objective. This is the definition of the verb purpose, to have as one's intention or objective. And this idea of intentionality, I think, is what is so appealing to all of us, and to particularly to this generation. And when we think about how a company defines and articulates its purpose with similar intentionality, we think it really can be quite powerful for an entire organization. The purpose statement of a company expresses the distinctive contribution an organization can make, and it articulates the ultimate impact it wants to have on the world. Purpose defines a core reason for being, and it shapes how a company delivers, yes, its business, but how it also creates impact on society. And we would certainly hope that it helps steer both the senior-most decision makers and all employees on the decisions that most matter at the moments of truth in the organization. And one of the things that we have experienced ourselves and that we see across many companies is the impact that having purpose can have on employees. Attracting, retaining, and motivating this generation requires a clear idea of the organization's impact on the world. Younger workers, younger employees want to understand and feel how their work is making a broader contribution to society, and as much as they can, they want to be able to connect their individual purpose to the broader purpose of the organization. And this has been one of the most interesting exercises I certainly have been a part of over the last year, as I have engaged with many of my peers and many of the newest folks who've joined the firm in really hearing from people, what is it that motivates them? What is their intention? What matters to them? And certainly what I have found is that what matters to me, my sense of purpose in my work, is actually different than other colleagues. It may have common threads, but it does bear differences, and it reflects how each of us see the world and our landscape. So we have been doing, as you can imagine, quite a lot of thinking about this, and we've seen our clients go through the exercise of thinking about the why or the what of their purpose. Why should we care about purpose? Should we do more as an organization? What should our purpose statement be? But we're finding that it's not enough, and one of the places that we're spending quite a lot of time thinking now, and I have many colleagues who are here at the front, Bruce Simpson and Lynn Taliento and many others, we're helping companies think about the how of purpose. What does it mean to truly embed purpose in your organization? What does it mean to take action around your strategy, around operations, your supply chain, organization? And we do think that it requires a much more thorough understanding across your entire value chain and across a very, very wide view of your stakeholders. It also demands a pretty clear-eyed view of measurement so that you can hold yourself accountable both internally and to your external stakeholders. Getting the how of purpose right is very important, but it is hard, and it will often require trade-offs, sometimes very uncomfortable conversations. Should I exit a product or a certain market? What are the consequences or benefits of different pricing and marketing decisions that I might make? How will leaders be evaluated and compensated on the basis of how they deliver against the organization's purpose? These certainly do lead often to challenging questions, and I'm very glad to see this very, very broad audience here who maybe can help us come up with some answers to some of these questions today. And it also, we would note that putting purpose into action can feel pretty uncomfortable. The upshot, of course, is that getting purpose right can be incredibly valuable over the long term for shareholders and for society at large. And certainly, as I have been in many conversations that look at the landscape of what is happening politically today, more and more I see government leaders turning to those of us in business to say, we do need your help and we do expect your help. And I think that's a big opportunity for corporations today. We see the opportunity for a greater sense of purpose to inspire bold investments in areas that will create ultimately long-term value. We see it as an opportunity for an organization to get real clarity about their most distinctive strengths. And we see it as an opportunity to unleash inspiration in your organization across your employees to do much more to make a difference in society. It's that potential for impact and value creation that makes us so excited about our initiative on purpose. It's also why McKinsey is investing so much in new thinking, in tools, in knowledge in this area, and why so many of our colleagues are here today. It's why I'm excited to be here today among many peers. We're very grateful to be a part of this community, and we hope to learn a lot. Thank you so much all for being here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Liz. I'm back, and I will be super brief. I just want to say we have a magnificent audience here today. In the room, we have leaders from business, finance, sustainability, marketing, philanthropy, and so many others. So here's the practical stuff. We want you to all join the conversation. We would love you to join us on Twitter at AtlanticLIVE, and you can see the hashtag is AtlanticCSR. It's one word. By the way, if you're wondering, the password so you can actually get online is the Wi-Fi network is Power of Purpose, and the password is, not surprisingly, Atlantic, all lowercase. Not surprisingly, is not in there, at just Atlantic. I know that you'll have many smart questions over the course of the day, so we're going to make time for Q&A throughout the morning and afternoon, and I'm going to give you a very quick download on how this will work. So if you'll indulge me, take out your phone and open a browser. This isn't mandatory, but we hope you'll all play along. Once you have your phones out, type in Slido. That's SLIDO.com. You can see it on the screen behind me, SLIDO.com. Is everyone with me? You're quiet. Is everybody with me? Good, 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 good. Okay, next, type Atlantic CSR. It's one word. And on your screen, you'll notice an option to ask questions, and we're going to be using this technology throughout the day. You can identify who you are and what you do. We love to know that, but you don't have to. We want to hear from all perspectives, so please, please don't be shy about asking your questions. And with that, let's get rolling. Our first session is Leading with Purpose. For that, please welcome the Chair, President, and CEO of Allstate, Tom Wilson. He's here with Atlantic contributor and the host of WNYC's All of It, Allison Stewart.
Thank you.
Hey, good morning. So Tom, you wrote an op-ed in the New York Times that was titled, ooh, it's loud, here we go, Save Capitalism by Paying People More. What about capitalism needs saving?
Well, it's not working for a lot of people. I think we're confused by looking at the unemployment rate at 3.6% or whatever it is and saying like everything's fine. And the points that you can notice where it needs saving, less than half of millennials really believe in capitalism. They're not really sure what socialism is. When you look at the research, they don't really understand that it's those of us who are older think of it as different. But they know it's not working for them. And one of the reasons it's not working is that 40% of Americans don't have $400 for an emergency. And so if you look at the financial health, and the one way you were to measure your temperature would be unemployment rate, you'd say, yeah, you're fine. But if you look and say 40% of the people don't have $400 for an emergency, you'd say that financially we're sick in America. And if the system doesn't work for people, people will change the system.
One of the things you did at Allstate is you raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour in 2016. What went into that decision? When did those conversations first start to happen?
Well, there weren't a lot of conversations. So I was down, we have a place in Dallas, and we had changed our medical benefits because people who have families get a lot more benefits than the people who are individuals. And we wanted to reduce that gap a little bit. So we had raised the price for families a fair amount. So I'm down in Dallas, and we got a couple thousand people down there, and like nobody's complaining. And I'm like, how come they're not mad? Like I would think they'd be yelling at me about the medical stuff. Like, oh, well, they're not on our plan. I said, what do you mean they're not on our plan? They said, well, they're on the state plan. I said, how can they be on the state plan? They said, well, they make like $12 an hour, and if you make $12 an hour, you can be in the state plan. I said, they make $12 an hour? That's ridiculous. Like, we should pay more. So we decided to pay $15 an hour. It wasn't a long debate or discussion. We did it because we could. Now, not all jobs are worth that much money. I thought ours were. So part of the thing I've been saying is we need to figure out how to create more high-value jobs.
When you were going through this decision-making process, did anyone play devil's advocate? And when they did, what did they say to you? Like, Tom, we can't do this.
Well, they said, it was, I think, cost us $8 million a year down there. And they were like, we're trying to control our expenses, and we are trying to keep our prices low for our customers. The other side to that, though, is if you pay people more, they'll be more engaged. You'll have lower turnover. There's some stats that show that 20% of workers in America are actively disengaged on a daily basis. Actively disengaged, right? So you're like, okay, wow. If somehow I can have them feel more engaged, more empowered, then they'll be better workers, and it'll lower our costs in total.
Did you have to pass along the cost to customers in any way?
Yeah, but there's lots of things you pass. You hire consultants, you do advertising. I just decided it was the right thing to do. Like, I didn't really get into that much math. There were a few people who didn't want to do it, but mostly it was just us saying, it's the right thing, and move forward.
In your op-ed, you named that corporate leaders and boards need to put jobs on their agendas. So what does that look like?
Well, first, I want to go way up for a second, then come down. So I think the role of business is first serve our customers. We talked about that. We're supposed to make a profit. It's to create jobs, and it's to improve our community. So those are four things people expect of businesses. And the first one we talk about all the time. We do a pretty good job. Second one, some people think like profit's a bad idea. And I'm like, profit's just a measure of how much value you create. As a business, we take stuff from society. That's called cost. We give it back. It's called revenue. And if you give back more than you took, it's a profit. Now, there's a high art form on that, right? There's like, I don't know, a couple million accountants and public accountants and all kinds of rules in the SEC. When you go to the third part, creating jobs, there's no math. And it's every bit as important. If you ask Americans, you think businesses should make money, about 35-40% say, yeah, they should make money. If you ask them, should they create jobs, like over 50%, it's almost 60%. And so if it's that important to society, if that's why we exist, then we have to do that. And most businesses don't talk that much about it.
How do they start? How does a business start? Someone says, Tom,
well, I think,
help me out. Give me a plan.
Well, I think it has to start with investors, and it has to start with boards. Mm-hmm. And so in this op-ed I wrote, I've been hanging around corporate boards for my whole career, and we talk about profit in every board meeting, like every committee meeting, like it's everywhere, right? If you said, how many times do they talk about just creating jobs? Not how many jobs did you create because you were winning or something like that, but just your objective is to create jobs. It's a fraction, and I've talked to friends and other people I know, and it's the same everywhere. So first thing is we need to start talking about it. Second is we need to figure out how to measure it, and I think part of it is also we need to get investors to start asking people like me, like, what are you doing on creating jobs? Because, it's easy for me to say, but if every time I go to a meeting, we all got bosses. So mine are, I got a board and I got shareholders. And so when they go in, and if every time they ask you how much money we make, you tell them. If you said how many jobs you create, I would tell them. They never ask. So we need to get investors to start saying, look, going to the companies they invested in, say, yeah, we want to know about how much money you're making, how you're serving your customers. We're interested in ESG, which is another hot button these days, or environmental social governance. But also, are you creating any jobs? Because creating jobs is what society expects of us.
Let's talk about your workforce. You mentioned that statistic that 20% are actively disengaged.
Yeah.
You have a program where you really want to get to people, quite literally, and help them figure out their power of purpose. What is this program?
So we're big believers in purpose. We'd like to. on the path of becoming a purpose-driven company. We're not yet totally filled up with purpose-driven people, but we're headed there. The concept is, if people are your key asset, that's because we don't really make anything. You know, we just got a bunch of people come in every day and go to work, get on their computers, and you want them to be motivated. So we decided to do this program called, we viewed it as give to get. If we give to the employees their ability to think out what their own purpose is, then they would give back to us with commitment to us. And that's turned out to be true. So we have a program where we help you figure out your own individual purpose. It's not linked to Allstate. It's not linked to what we do. It's just like, why do you do what you do? When you get up in the morning, you got up to come here today, you came here for some reason. And it's about giving people the opportunity to figure out what their purpose is and then build their life around it. And so we've helped 34,000 people through that. And we're always in the top decile of companies in terms of engaged employees, which I think works for us.
Is it a mandatory program?
No, although it's becoming a little cultural, you know, it's like if you don't go. It's mandatory for our leaders. So if you're one of the top 200 leaders in a company, you have to go. Everybody else, you can just self-select it. So the numbers on it are off the charts in terms of how much people like it, but it's a little biased because it's self-selection. You know, if you really don't want to do it, you just don't go.
So what happens? What kind of questions are you asking people to ask of themselves? What kind of considerations?
Well, it has two parts to it. And I would recommend this for everybody. Really thinking about what your purpose is will make your life better. So it has two parts to it. It has a physical part and a purpose part. And you collect all this information. You know, you collect what you eat, how much you sleep, so you don't write down that you ate the brownie, or you don't eat the brownie because you got to write it down. You know, so you kind of cheat on some of this stuff. But then you do 360s with your friends, your families, and you get all this information. And we teach you about exercise, nutrition, and movement. We also help you, and that's to give you the energy to figure out how to live into your purpose. In your purpose, you do three things. You write down what's your current story. And it's in a positive way. So like mine was, the truth is I have a good relationship with my kids, but I run the risk of them making my story their story. Truth is I can be a good CEO doing it the way I am, but I run the risk of not leaving behind enough good leaders and burning out. So it's positive, right? But it recognizes, like all of us, we make trade-offs every day. Then you write down your purpose, and you write your purpose down on paper, because if you write it down, you won't lie to yourself. You won't tell yourself little stories. And then you share that purpose with other people, very important, because if you share it, you change the system that you operate in, because people want to help you. And then you write your new story, cleverly called New Story, because you're going to do something different. But then, importantly, you build a 90-day training program around it. 90, yeah. It's by week, but you spread it out, and it's like every day. And so, like I had really no upper body strength because I was always a runner. So I started doing that. I call my mother, at least every other day, usually every day, because it got into my training program. We put it in a training program, we do it for 90 days, kind of sticks with you. If you don't, the concept is forget it, don't worry about it. And so it's energy for life. It's created by a company called the Human Performance Institute down in Florida. And I would highly recommend, think about it. Invest in yourself. Give yourself a few minutes to step back and think about your purpose. We did that, and it ties together neatly with our purpose at Allstate. We don't ask people to link your purpose to ours or something like that. We want them to have theirs, and we think if they believe in theirs, they'll help us get ours.
What's been the impact on the workforce of this program? Anecdotally or?
Anecdotally, if you take the program, you really like it. People send me photos of themselves, how they're different now than they were before. Some of that's the physical stuff. But some people have left us. And I'm okay with that. We had one of the best reinsurance guys in the world left us. He wanted to go be a math teacher. And I was like, okay, better you do that than be a, 55-year-old crabby person who thinks we convinced you to stay here your whole life. It's freeing for people, and it's freeing to know what your purpose is, to write it down, and to share it with other people. Somehow, eliminates that burden of people not helping you, and it also helps you define yourself the way you want to define yourself.
What do you think is the obstacle for people to figuring out their purpose? As someone who's seen a lot of these reports and seen the impact of it, what stops people from finding their purpose?
One is just having a structure around it and take some time. Because, the day-to-day, my grandmother once said to me, they put a man on the moon, and I was out at her house looking up at the moon, and I'm like, isn't it amazing? There's like a guy on the moon, and you grew up in the horse and buggy days. And she said, not really. You said it just happens a day at a time. Your life happens a day at a time. Unless you step out of that day and step back and say, why am I doing this? Why am I, and give yourself that. So you need, some of it's just making the time. I think there's, I know I felt nervous, maybe self-aware, like, self-centered, like sharing your purpose with other people. Like, do they really want to know? And am I making it all about me? I have found when you share your purpose with other people, they embrace it. They're thankful that you shared it with them, and they will help you do it. It's because they want you to succeed. And so I think some of it's just in our own heads of not wanting to be vulnerable.
How has it changed your career trajectory, finding your purpose? Some choice you made?
Yeah, that's interesting because like one of the ways, so here's in a very tactical way. So my purpose is to help other people achieve more meaning and success in their lives. That's what I do. That's part of the reason I'm here. And it wasn't always the case. Like my purpose at one time was I had a dial phone and I wanted a push button phone to get promoted, But so you have different purposes over time. Now I'm kind of in this other realm. So now I do performance reviews differently. When I do a performance review, I say to somebody, look, my job is to make you more successful. So I'm going to give you this feedback to try to make you more successful. I might be wrong, but I'm really trying. I get paid to evaluate you. Like, I got to do that. But it's also helped me in things like the op-ed. Like if my purpose is to try to help people have more success, when I wrote the op-ed, I shared it with my board. Not because I said, look, I'm not sharing it with you because like you get to approve what I do. But like I'm talking about boards and we don't talk much about jobs. Like if you're going to be offended, like let me know so you at least know in advance. And one of them said, well, what happens if you don't create enough high-paying jobs? Like you're putting yourself out there. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's true. So if somebody else does, then it's further along in my purpose that someone else did it. So I think it frees you up to take risks. It gives you the intestinal fortitude when you get that emotional pushback during a day. We all have them, where like someone pushes on you and like, "This is driving me crazy," and you go back and say, "Okay, why am I here? I'm here because I'm doing this," and it helps you get past it.
I'm going to take some questions in just a few minutes, so go to Slido and do your thing. Your op-ed came out after something called the Business Roundtable, which was a group that represented large corporations, right? Allstate's not part of this, was not part of this roundtable. And it was this statement about how corporate boards are going to, and corporate companies were going to do better, and they were going to be better stewards, and they were going to be more invested. But one of the things about this report, if you dug into it, is there were 3 banks that made a lot of money off the housing crisis. There was Amazon, fill in your complaint there. There was FedEx, which I don't know if anybody listened to the Daily this morning or read the New York Times about them paying 0 taxes. Going on and on. Boeing is on that list. The CEO signed it. These are all these CEOs who signed it. What is the use of those kind of statements in terms of if you're going to have companies that maybe they're telling, but they're not showing? They're saying, yes, we're going to do this, but their corporate behavior is otherwise.
I mean,
what is the use of something like that?
It's a really good question. First, I think the BRT thing was well said. It wasn't that specific, so I think the next step is let's be more specific. That's why I wrote the op-ed about creating jobs. I'm like, yeah, it's great, but it's kind of general. But you have to change the environment in which we have the dialogue. And so I thought they were starting to change that dialogue. They didn't have prescription on it. And I would say, we're all in this together, and none of us are perfect. Like I have 3 kids. Like some things like I tell them to do that I don't do, and vice versa. Yeah, I think if we change the context, people will think differently about that which they did. And just because they didn't do it before doesn't mean they won't do it in the future, right? Like, so maybe people will think differently about the housing crisis. Maybe, FedEx is being criticized for, not paying taxes. Maybe they'll think differently about it. I don't know. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. I'm not judging, but I think if we don't have the dialogue and we sort of say everybody gets to do it their own way and none of us have social responsibility, then I think capitalism will continue to be attacked.
Let's take a question. This is from Julie, who is a climate scientist. How do you think about the opportunities and challenges of climate change and the energy transition for business?
So, I think climate change is real. I think it's man-made and by just the change of the world. It's hard for me to attribute how much is which, but certainly as human beings, we can do a better job of not ruining our planet. So, and I'd say climate change is real. We have this ad with Dennis Haysbert's in the middle of this storm. He says, this is a 1 in a 500-year storm. He says the only difference has been 26 in the last 10 years. And so, the weather's a lot more severe. I can tell you about it. I think we need to go after climate change. I think we need to figure out how to, quit spewing carbon into the air, and we should tax carbon. Anytime there's a free good for society, people overuse it. So that would be my answer. The other part, though, that I'm sad we're not after is remediation. And of course, I see this. We all see this from our own chair. But in the insurance business, you see all these people losing all their possessions, all their stuff, because we don't have enough support if a hurricane comes or stuff floods or we don't protect them, the levees aren't good. So while we need to make sure we fix it over a 50-year period of time, we also should do more with just the fact that it's more severe today. And I feel like everybody keeps arguing about, how did it get created? I'm like, does it really matter? What we do know is it's here, so we should fix that, help people have enough protection when stuff happens. And then let's quit doing stuff we know is bad. Even if it doesn't, you wouldn't wreck something that you have yourself, even if you weren't going to use it. Why would you wreck it?
How do you think about the connection between someone's personal purpose and the company's purpose?
Well, Allstate's purpose, we're very clear about it. We have a 1-page deal. It's our shared purpose. Lots of companies have it. And so we put that out there for everybody. We ask them to, and that includes their leadership behaviors and how they should act inside a company, because a company has a culture. It's a self-reinforcing system. And so we want them to have if they bring their personal purpose, we believe that they'll embrace our purpose. So that's the give to get. We don't ask them to make sure that their personal purpose lines up with ours. You just have what you want to do and go make a difference.
This is from Kate. How does AI factor into purpose and profit? How do you reconcile the need for AI as it helps your bottom line and the need to create jobs and raise wages?
That's a really interesting question because I'm right in the middle of it. So I think AI is like a tsunami going to rip through the service industry. And let me give you an example. If your car used to get wrecked, you would drive to one of our 937 drive-thrus, or you would go to a body shop and we would send an adjuster there to look at your car and figure out how much it costs to fix it. Today, you send us 6 pictures, no more drive-thrus. We have fewer adjusters because they're not driving around. We're paying them to sit in front of a computer, and eventually the computer's going to do a lot of that work too. And so as a result of that, that's changed our employment with people. So one of the things I'm thinking about in jobs is I said to our team, how much do we pay those people? People who used to drive around and be and how much do we pay them now? And they're much more productive now. And so we're looking at, we think we have to pay them more. Even though think in their minds they're doing the same job, they're just making more money for us. So thinking about how you pay relative to how much value somebody creates rather than what you can get away with and what's the lowest price in the marketplace. So that's part of it. The other part is back to the employee proposition. I think it's about employability, and we're behind in this. I've been complaining about it for a couple of years, and I've not been successful, which is if I can't guarantee you a job, because AI is going to rip through Allstate, what I can do is ensure you're employable. And employable, we have a really simple question. It's you can get another job at the same or more money. Like not really complicated and all that kind of stuff. So we're trying to make that part of our employee value proposition, which means I got to spend money training people to do stuff that's maybe not for us.
Some people think CSR is just marketing to distract from bad business practices. Does this criticism have any merit? How do you respond to it?
Does it have any merit? Yeah, I guess it has merit. I mean, maybe some people do it, but I'm like, okay, well, first I would focus on is the CSR stuff doing good work? Does it intent really matter? If you're helping people who are underprivileged or need additional help, that should be a good thing. And I don't. Sometimes I feel like we get all caught up in what's the intent? I don't know. I'm happy they're helping people.
You sound like you have a really interesting mix of the practical and sort of the spiritual about all of this. You're sort of got to get it done, but we have to think about it on a higher plane too. How does that work? How do you combine those two?
Well, you have to build strategic, we call it middleware. So in your computer, you got a keyboard, and then you have the processor in there that's zeros and ones. And that keyboard, there's a bunch of middleware. It's not really a good technical description. A bunch of middleware between the keyboard and the processor. And so if you think of the keyboard as your vision statement or your own purpose, and you think about the processor, the zeros and ones, as your day-to-day activity, what we try to do is build out a series of middleware that helps us figure out how to do it. So what's my purpose? I write it down. What does that translate into how often I call my mother? What does that translate into how I treat my kids? What is it? And you keep breaking it down so then when you get to that day-to-day activity and I'm tired and I don't want to go do upper body strength stuff, but I'm like, nope, part of my purpose was I need to be strong and have decent posture. Because if I'm not strong, don't have decent posture, I'm not going to be able to help other people. So you build out this middleware. I wish I had thought about this earlier. I've been on this purpose journey for about 15 years, and I sort of feel like the middleware stuff, if I had spent more time on it 15 years ago, I'd be farther along. I feel like I was just in this dark room, and I kept bumping into the wall, and I'm looking for the door, and the door was, oh, you better define it. So what I've found is if I define it and I write it down, I'm likely to do it, and that helps me get my purpose.
Tom Wilson, Chair and President and CEO of Allstate. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You're with your order.
For a talk about the exploitation of purpose, please welcome Alain Sylvain, founder and CEO of Sylvain Labs.
Morning. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Alain Sylvain. I'm the founder and CEO of Sylvain Labs. We're a strategy and design consultancy here in New York, but we have offices elsewhere too. We help companies think about their future, their products and brands. I'm here to talk about the exploitation of purpose, about how companies have misappropriated this term in some cases and perhaps used it for ill. I want to start with a story. I want to talk about Dr. John Rock. Dr. John Rock was a famous OBGYN and researcher born and raised outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and he saw, as an Irish Catholic, the dangers and risks of too big families, of families that were too large. And he took it as his own life mission to help women discover and implement birth control, to give them power of their body and use the natural reproductive system to do birth control. And here's the thing. Dr. Rock was a devout Catholic. He devoted his life to Catholicism. And so it was really interesting. It was in conflict. Here he was advocating for birth control, but at the same time was a staunch Catholic. And he famously said, "Always stick to your own conscience. Let no one ever keep it for you." That was his attitude about the Catholic Church. His own purpose to help women control their bodies and achieve a sense of birth control was greater than his belief in the Catholic Church. His purpose was paramount. And I like to think about that story because it helps ground what purpose is and what that term really can be. Because we're at a time now where purpose has been sort of used over and over and over again. This is not the only conference called Purpose. Purpose is thrown around, and we've become sort of numb to its meaning almost. And it's important to step back and think, what does purpose really, really mean? And if you look it up in a dictionary, it's really about the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. But yet we use purpose in so many contexts: CSR, personal purpose, organizational vision. The term is used a lot of different ways, and I question, are we all really speaking the same language? But here's the thing: purpose, the idea of purpose, is part of the human condition. Everything we do, every decision we make, everything we buy, every product that's made, every single thing is derived by some sort of purpose. It's like a drop of ink in a glass of water. Purpose is everywhere. Purpose is everywhere in how we think, and there's a reason for that. We have a primal connection to purpose. Purpose connects us to community. It actually creates the sense of mutual interdependence. We align ourselves with like-minded people. You know, Beyonce in the Bayhive, you might argue her product is not actually music. It's the ability to align us and mobilize like-minded people. That's what Beyonce is doing. Purpose gives us a reason to live. There's all this great research that shows that people can almost cure their own physicality, their own body, through having a sense of hope and a sense of purpose. Purpose informs our own self-identity. You know, there's the parable of the three bricklayers. The first one says, I'm just a bricklayer. The second one says, I'm building a church. And the third bricklayer says, I'm building a house of God. It's through purpose that we often define ourselves and our role in society. And it's very interesting that corporations are increasingly channeling our own purpose to help promote themselves. And many of us as consumers, we're looking to companies to help express our own sense of purpose, our own beliefs, our own values. And it's become intertwined with profit. And we're beginning to see purpose used in marketing as a way to drive sales. And Colin Kaepernick's, the endorsement of Colin Kaepernick by Nike is a great example of this. It really was a polarizing moment where Nike made a claim and stated its purpose to support this athlete and support these marginalized voices and support of police brutality, criticizing police brutality. And that triggered sales. And that's why this discourse around profit, or I should say purpose over profit, is around. We hear it all the time. It's a maxim heard over and over again, purpose over profit. We hear it all the time. And it's really become sort of really on vogue within the past couple of years. Certainly with the Business Roundtable and other things that have been discussed. But Larry Fink, his letter to CEOs for the past 2 years is really a great step forward in this conversation, because he argues that purpose is actually key to fundamental business practice. It's not really just all about touchy-feely, have a purpose and care for your neighbor. It's actually tied to revenue. Companies are stepping up, and companies increasingly are looked to, perhaps in this polarized political environment, to have a voice, whether you're talking about CEOs lining up for gun control, or CEOs lining up for immigration reform, or CEOs lining up for climate change. I believe that 2020 we'll see many more of these CEO letters, and we'll see many of these headlines over and over again. Brands have been created to manifest these purposes, and now companies, through their brands, are trying to save the world, which is kind of crazy. 50 years we would never talk about companies really having the right and the power and the privilege and the hubris, perhaps, to save the world. Brands are now, believe it's within their remit to save the world. Tesla is not a car company. Tesla is a visionary, innovative company that espouses all the great values of innovation. Or Beyond Meats and Impossible Foods. They're not just a food company. It's kind of a food science company with a really environmental sensibility. So it's not just about food. Or Fenty Beauty is not just a makeups or cosmetics brand. It's really a platform for diversity and inclusion. Brands right now, their core products, what they're making on the manufacturing line is actually not plastic or certain goods. It's actually a belief system or a purpose itself. But here's the thing. There's a dark side to purpose. We're beginning to see this term and this idea being exploited by brands. Whether you're talking about pink washing, State Street and their statue, the Fearless Girl down in Wall Street, got a lot of attention, but a lot of people don't know that State Street had to pay a $5 million gender pay discrimination suit not too long ago, or that their board is perhaps overly male. Rainbow washing. You go to pride parades, you'll see a lot of consumer banks sponsoring these parades, but what you might not know is that 73% of same-sex couples are more likely to not be accepted for a loan or a mortgage. Greenwashing. Fiji Water, about 2008, made a promise to be carbon negative. And they set some audacious goals and had to dial them back and really mute that pledge. It's a lot. These companies are really making these really audacious claims and latching onto these social movements. How about woke washing? How about these companies that are now, claiming to have some sort of virtuous integrity for what they stand for? This Gillette and this whole idea of the best a man can be. What right does Gillette have to join the gender conversation in 2019? I argue all of this is a sort of hollow advocacy. That these are exploiting tactics of companies to try to tap into our wallets and tap into our hearts. And so I think it's really quite simple. Stop pimping purpose. I think it's much more than that. Which takes me back to John Rock. Always stick to your own conscience. Let no one ever keep it for you. Brands should not keep our conscience. We should not be looking for brands to help express our own identity. Because purpose is easy. Commitment is hard. The commitment is key. The companies that commit to change over decades, over generations, that to me is impressive. That perhaps is a manifestation of their purpose in a new way. John Rock, he committed decades of his life through this fight, so much so that he was estranged by the Catholic Church in the last 20 years of his life, back from the 30s all the way into the late 70s. A lot of us talk about Patagonia in this context, of course, and we all roll our eyes at purpose of Patagonia. You ready for another Patagonia example? But there's a reason for that. Founded in 1973, every day, Patagonia commits to their cause to save the planet through business. Every single day. It's very en vogue today, but since 1973, they've donated profits, they've contributed to environmental causes, they're 100% organic cottons, day after day after day, and that's commitment. That's not a promise, that's a commitment. Or Ben & Jerry and their commitment to linear prosperity and making sure everyone along that cycle, from employees to supply chain, everybody, in some way benefits from the power of what they're doing. So again, it takes me back to John Rock. If this humble physician in Boston could commit to something greater than any organization, as powerful as the Catholic Church, what does that say about us and the companies we represent? What would a company filled with John Rocks look like, where we're all committed to a united and common purpose? That, to me, is truly, truly the power of purpose. My name is Alain Sylvain, founder and CEO of Sylvain Labs. Thank you for your time.
For a session produced by our underwriter, please welcome WWE superstar Titus O'Neil and Tara Carrero, Executive Vice President and Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Nestle Waters North America.
Where's my seat?
Okay.
These things regulation? I'm a big dude,
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. So we're going to hear a lot of great examples today about how companies are using their corporate purpose to drive change. But I'd like to shift gears for a moment and hear from someone who's driving change through personal purpose. So it's my great pleasure to introduce my friend, WWE superstar Titus O'Neil. In addition to being an accomplished athlete and entertainer for WWE, outside of the ring, Titus is a hardworking philanthropist and mentor, helping to raise millions of dollars for charities, scholarships for student athletes, and at-risk youth. For the past 2 years, Titus has been part of a successful campaign between Nestle Waters and WWE to encourage children and families to choose water as part of a healthy lifestyle. But that is not what we're going to talk about today. Titus and I have known each other for 7 years, and I can assure you that he has an amazing story. So amazing, in fact, that he wrote a book about it. His book, No Such Thing as a Bad Kid, which came out this summer, details his path from a very turbulent childhood in South Florida to finding his personal purpose, which has helped define the rest of his life. So Titus, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So you're the author of this
seats are
new
really
book, No Such Thing as a Bad Kid.
Yeah.
Tell me how that title came about.
Well, first, I know we like scripted for time, but I want everybody that has their phone, most of you should have it out anyway, because I dressed up for y'all. I want you to text anybody in your phone this exact message that I'm going to have you text. I love you, and I believe in you. I love you, and I believe in you. Some of y'all ain't texting. I'm off the clock, but I will get on and body slam somebody. So I'll give you your answers or responses right away before you even get them. Some of them are going to be like, hey, is everything okay? Did I do something wrong? The second one is going to be, thanks, I really needed that. My morning was really going a wrong way, and it helped me out. And then the third one is that they're going to reciprocate to you and say to you, I love you, and I believe in you too. So, which takes me to the purpose of why I wrote the book and my purpose of why I do what I do for a living. So I am a product of a rape. My mother was raped at 11 years old. She had me at the age of 12. She was actually driven from North Florida in St. Augustine down to South Florida in Boynton Beach, Florida, to have an abortion, and she jumped out of the car, and 4 months later I was born. I grew up poor. I grew up labeled a kid that would be dead or in jail by the time I was 16, and I believed that for a majority of my young adult life. I had an opportunity to go to a place called the Florida Sheriff's Boys Ranch, and one conversation that I had at that moment, I was getting ready to actually be discharged from the Boys Ranch because I had anger issues and fought a lot, and I just signed a contract that I would not fight anymore, and 30 minutes after signing that contract, I got into another fight, so I was supposed to be sent home, which is very ironic to me because now I get paid a lot of money to run around with boots, baby oil, and underwear on TV to quote-unquote fight. And so he said to me, why do you think you get in trouble all the time? And I said, I don't know. I think I'm just a bad kid. And he said, there's no such thing as a bad kid. And right after that, he immediately told me that, I'm going to tell you something and I want you to believe it. He said, I love you and I believe in you. Now, a lot of people at that point had told me that they loved me, but then turned right around and abused me, beat me, cussed me, etc. But nobody at that point had ever told me that they believed that I can do anything. I was actually told the opposite, that I would be dead or in jail by the time I was 16. And so this book that a majority of you guys will get a copy of out of here is a small glimpse of what I think is an overall message of don't label people, because you never know how they're going to turn out. And I went from being an underperforming student to, first person in my family to graduate from high school, first person to graduate from college, the illustrious and great University of Florida. Go Gators. Few claps.
It's New York.
Yeah. Yeah, correct. But yeah, that's kind of how I came up with the topic of the book.
So you talked a little bit about, being labeled and the message in the book. What other messages do you want to send to people that are, looking to help those with challenges?
Well, I think challenges affect everybody, and a lot of times people think that, we got to go save the world for the underserved or for the homeless or et cetera. There are people in here that come from affluent backgrounds that have to face challenges. There's nobody sitting in this room that at one point in your life that somebody needed to encourage you, motivate you, help support you financially, to get you through college, to talk you off of a ledge of making a decision to quit your job, et cetera. We all go through challenges, but the great part about life, and my life in general, has been that there's been so many transactions that have made transformation. And I think that that's why my family foundation, that's what we're about. We're about making transformational change, and that's what I try to push companies and organizations to do too. make transformational change. And what I mean by that is like, it's Christmas time, oh, let's go get a bunch of gifts for kids. Well, that's a one-time transaction that people do once a year, but the other 364 days a year, what are you doing? You know, and people start building their purpose on giving, but are you giving consistently? And to me, transformation happens when we do things consistently. And unfortunately, we, you know, I say this, and sometimes it pisses people off, but I don't care. You know, we have this bravado about being the best company or the best country in the world. Meanwhile, we have people homeless or people that fought for this country that are homeless and still dealing with issues or whatever. And I feel like in order for us to be the best country in the world or the best company in the world, we need to start being the best people in the world. And that doesn't matter what political background you know, come from, what race you are, black, white, Hispanic, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how much money you make or you don't make. It's unfortunate that most times, the only time we ever come together as a country is in tragedy. A hurricane happens, we got a hashtag going. You know, tornado happens, we got so much empathy about other people, but then on a day-to-day basis, what are you doing at home, starting with your own family, and then what are you doing at your job? How are you pushing the narrative to change things and not worry about the profit or not worry about the loss of income because you have to support something? That's what has helped me get to the point of learning how to deal with people with challenges, but also helping others help others with challenges. Focus on the issue and not on the background.
So you're doing something pretty extraordinary in your community of Tampa, Florida, to drive transformational change. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I know a lot of you may be familiar with what LeBron James has been doing with the Akron public schools. I'm doing the same thing in Tampa, where we're transforming an entire neighborhood, not just with the school, but I'm building a prosperity center with my family foundation, where we'll be able to help the adults, because a lot of times everybody drives things towards the kids. But the adults need to help equally as much, especially in underserved communities, because the high school graduation rates are not that high and college attendance is not that high, and you're working minimum wage jobs. So we're building this prosperity center to help the adults. We have financial literacy courses. We have a culinary course that we're going to be able to not only teach culinary in a 10 to 12 week course and place them in higher wage jobs, but we're also going to be able to feed 500 to 1,000 families a week with take-home meals. We're building a track and field and trying to change the whole culture, because I know gentrification is coming to that area. It's inevitable, and I want to have these families that are in need and these teachers that are very undervalued worldwide be in a better position to have resources come to them. So we're bringing partners and corporations there to kind of help influence that change, and also give these people that, you know, say they want to be involved with positive change an opportunity to do so.
So on TV for WWE, you play a real-life superhero, but you have this theory that you actually don't need to be a WWE superstar to be a hero.
No, we all are heroes. Everybody in this room, and kids are heroes. The elderly are heroes. I've seen kids that have battled cancer, beat cancer 2 or 3 times, that have shown their heroic sense. We all have the power to transform lives. And so when I asked you to send that text earlier, you know, you got one of those 3 responses. Now, you did that with somebody that you know. My question is, what is going to happen, or how you think it's going to change things when you do it with a complete stranger? When you tell someone and you show someone, I love you and I believe in you, unsolicited, out of your own goodness of your heart, what happens when your company and your pool of influencers come together and say, we're going to go fight this cause and this issue, and we don't care what these folks look like, where they come from, etc. This is what we're going at today. You guys have done walks for breast cancer. You guys have done so many things that help raise money and funds, and your purpose is driven behind that because you're connected to it. So I would urge all of you to be the hero that you are, no matter where you come from, what you look like, how much money you make, to be a heroic person of humanity, a hero of humanity, teaching human beings how to be transformational and not transactional.
Great. Thank you very much. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your truly inspiring story. We do have copies of Titus's book available for everyone
low
here
price.
today.
No, actually, they already paid for it.
And we hope that it inspires all of you.
But if I
knew
sign
we
them,
weren't
though,
going to get through this.
I sign them.
But we want to inspire all of you to find your personal purpose and make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Deanna Hoskins, a formerly incarcerated individual and a benefactor of Dress for Success resources and services. My mother worked at Christ Hospital, so I always thought I would end up in a medical field in some aspect or another. But right around 1998, I have been actively engaged in using drugs. Started out as recreational, smoking weed, drinking, thinking it was the cool thing to do. And I ultimately started using crack cocaine. Original sentence was 5 years community supervision. And I remember the day of sentencing, I was literally under the influence of cocaine and alcohol and had not slept in days and showed up in court. And I immediately tried to figure out, how do I face the judge?
Deanna was in pretty deep trouble. She seemed angry at first, but I saw in Deanna a person that wanted to help herself. I could have sent her to prison, which I didn't do. I sent her to local jail and to a drug rehab center. She was told, you have to get involved in something constructive, and she did that. Dress for Success.
Once I got to the reentry phase, meaning I was starting to look for jobs out in the community, but I didn't have clothes. So the reentry coordinator at the time had connected with Dress for Success. She brought a couple of us to Dress for Success to get suited for job interviews. And then once you got the job interview, you can come back and get a couple of more outfits.
Deanna was our first client, and I had the opportunity to dress her.
Carol was one of the first persons that made me feel valuable. They made a big deal about try this on.
I didn't know how she viewed us, being really caring of her.
They provided the resources, the clothing that I needed to look for a job, but they always encouraged me to stay connected and come back.
You smell so good. I know, right?
Please welcome Joy Gordon, CEO of Dress for Success, and Lisana Kindler, CEO of Talbots. Here to lead the conversation, Atlantic Deputy Editor Jillian White.
Good morning. So that was obviously a pretty powerful video. Joy, I'm wondering what made you want to get involved in Dress for Success, and what do you think the women who you work with at Dress for Success, the customers who come in, what are they looking for, and what can Dress for Success do for them?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having us. 21 years ago, when Dress for Success was founded in New York City, I happened to, as a lawyer at the time, I was a prosecutor in the Bronx, I saw the founder of Dress for Success on the news, and she was talking about she had just created this organization that gave suits to women who needed them. And as a lawyer, I knew how I felt every day when I put on a suit to go to court. And so my intent at that time was really to donate one suit to Dress for Success. And I went from donating one suit and a conversation with the founder to joining the board. And then within a year, I left what I was doing to work in the basement of a church on West 4th Street to run the local Dress for Success. You fast forward that, now we have 158 offices in 28 countries around the world. And we've moved the needle from being an organization that simply gives women suits for interviews to really giving women the tools they need to succeed in work and in life. And I know how important the clothes mean to her. I know what it looks like when she looks in the mirror for the very first time and sees someone that she's fought to become. And that's what clothing does. Clothing matters. And so this today is really very special to me because I'm sitting next to our biggest champion, our biggest fan, our hugest supporter at Dress for Success to really talk about when power and purpose connect. And that's what this has been for me.
Yeah, and I want to get into that right now. What are the things that both of you saw that caused you to want to partner together, caused the organizations to want to partner together? What are kind of some of the shared values between Dress for Success and Talbot's. Susanna, you want to start?
So thank you for having me today. Always a pleasure to be with Joy. So when I joined Talbot 7 years ago, I did a lot of research on the brand and the customer and realized that Talbot's had always been a brand that was rooted in community and relationships with their customers. And Talbot's was always a brand where our associates gave back in the communities that they were in. And I wanted to find a way to take that to a national level and really mobilize the organization. And the shared values are truly around how we also think about our customers when they step into a Talbot's environment, how we create the opportunity for them to really feel confident about how they put themselves together. And it's much more than obviously just putting themselves together in a confident way, but really having a deep and meaningful relationship. So when I met Joy and we started talking, I realized that we think about our clients, our customers, the exact same way. And that became our shared platform.
The other really interesting thing that Lizana didn't realize when we met some 6 years ago was that when we were in the basement of a church on West 4th Street, the one thing that came to Dress for Success, and it was consistent and it was every month, was a box of suits from Talbot's. And we didn't know who was that fairy godmother at Talbot's that would package plus-size clothing, brand new. And we would receive this box. And so it was like Christmas in January, Christmas in February, Christmas in March. And for the women who would get a brand new suit that fit, that was perfect, that was hers, it made her feel special. So when Talbot's came a-knocking to Dress for Success, I knew that they were always a corporation with purpose. And I knew that if we could untap their client to be as passionate about our organization as the brand Talbot's was, then we would have this, literally this sea of supporters and donors and friends and potential board members and champions on a local level across the United States and Canada. And that I could have never, ever have imagined where we would be today with Talbot's, realizing that just 6 years ago, this was a concept. And we've come a long way. They're our largest corporate supporter, whether foundation, individual, or company. It's Talbot's now.
Listen, I want to talk about why you decided to come knocking on that door. A lot of corporations, when they want to do something, when they see alignment with a particular cause, they just create their own foundation, or they just kind of build their own thing from the ground up, or they send a check at best. But why did you decide to go kind of whole hog into partnership with an existing nonprofit?
So I really believe in going to where the expertise is, and I knew that we wanted to do something good, but I didn't know how to. So I had to seek out an organization that actually knew what they were doing, so that we could lend our support in a way that was truly meaningful, as opposed to figuring out the logistics of what it was that needed to be done. So that has worked out tremendously. I mean, our associates and our customers could not be more supportive. And of course, in collaboration with Joy and her team and the whole Dress for Success organization, coming together with each our expertise of what we can bring has just multiplied the effect. So it's been tremendous.
Yeah. I want to let our audience know we will be coming to you in just about 5 minutes for questions. So if you can start pulling out your phones now, getting onto Slido, and typing those in so we can get to as many as possible. So Joy, one, can you talk about kind of the extent of this partnership? You said it went from, there was a point where you guys were getting a box a month from Talbot's. What is the extent of the partnership now?
So today, well, let me back up a bit. 6 years ago, the point of entry for Dress for Success in Talbot's was to engage the customer. We really wanted to test whether or not the Talbot's customer would be committed to Dress for Success as not only Talbot's cause, but her cause. So it was really a roundup at the register at that time. It was asking her when she was at the register, after the sales team would talk to her about Dress for Success, would she be committed to making a gift to Dress for Success at the register? Well, the shock of that was not only was she willing, but she was extremely generous. There were women who were at the register paying for their goods and separately writing $500 checks to Dress for Success. So we had our own aha moment that the Talbot's customer is of a certain demographic that she is capable of giving, and she's willing to give to an organization that's about helping women in the workplace. You fast forward that this year at the register, that same woman who now knows the time of year that Dress for Success campaign is going on, she, at the register this year, in a more truncated amount of time, gave from her own wallet $1.2 million to Dress for Success at the register, coupled with Talbot's then took the campaign and brought in, and I'll let you speak to the other partners that we've added to the campaign.
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, we actually were approached by O Magazine and created a partnership with them as well, where we now design a capsule collection and donate from the net proceeds to Dress for Success. So that has just magnified the campaign and made it even bigger. But we also realized once we got past the first moment of testing out, how is this going to work, that we could ask our customers to bring in nearly new clothing to donate to Dress for Success. And we literally have customers that come in with rolling racks with dry cleaned clothing that we donate. So over the years, we've donated over 18,000 boxes of clothing. So the campaign has just, the partnership has evolved over the years and become deeper and deeper and more meaningful. And we do spend a lot of time educating our associates on what it is that Dress for Success does and why it's important and how we as women can support other women that are looking to get back into the workforce. Talbot's is 92% female associates, so it's, again, incredibly meaningful for our associates as it is for our customers to understand that we're supporting women getting back into the workforce.
Yeah. So a skeptical person would say that the reason that Talbot's maybe is partnering with Dress for Success or another nonprofit is because they get kind of that brand sheen off of doing something good. You say the name Dress for Success, it automatically conjures this idea of doing good, being good, helping people. So I wonder how you would respond to those skeptics who are saying the thing at the heart of this is the bounce that you get for the brand.
Yeah. Well, so we are very aggressive in our communication with our associates and with our customers, but we don't do big national advertising on Dress for Success. O Magazine has brought in a different layer in the partnership where they also are out there supporting the organization, but we're completely centered around Dress for Success, and this isn't a moment where Talbot's is pulling in money to do this. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do for us, for Dress for Success, for our associates, and for our customers. They care about women helping women. So it's really a very authentic partnership that we have. This isn't about, what can we make out of this? This is about how can we help?
Yeah. And then the kind of unintended ripple effect is that many of the associates, store managers, district managers have stepped into leadership positions at Dress for Success. They're board members, they're volunteers, they're deeply engaged. They're more passionate about the corporation they work for because it's a corporation with purpose. And so that's one of the unintended effects. Additionally, the donor, she's become a board member, a volunteer. She's found her purpose, her cause. And so the ripple effect to asking women to give, whatever they can give, has given us this enormous amount of reach that our organization didn't have before Talbot's. Yeah. And so what this company has done is it's opened door after door after door for us. And quite frankly, because they do it so well, there's other companies and other brands that are modeling what Talbot's is doing for Dress for Success so that they can do it and make a difference in front of their customers and have that experience for their associates as well.
So Joy just said that one of the things that's been really great about this partnership is that people, associates, other people within the organization have actually come and independently started working with Dress for Success. How do you, in a top-down way, talk about a partnership that gets people that committed to the cause outside of their 9-to-5 jobs?
So it's truly, for us, it's a trickle-down effect. So we talk about it all year, but we also solicit ambassadors within our organization, and those ambassadors are so passionate and work 24/7 to figure out how they can reach other associates and explain to them what it is that we do with Dress for Success and how they can get involved in Dress for Success. So it's truly, it's owned, I would say, all the way down through the organization. So this isn't an edict coming from the top saying, you must do this. Like, people are embracing it and taking it and sharing it with all of their other coworkers and customers.
Yeah. All right, let's take some audience questions. The first one is from Kate. As female CEOs, how important is partnering with and supporting other women-led organizations?
So I think I'm very passionate about that. And I think it is incredibly important because we are truly a women's organization. Our customers are women, our associates are women. So I couldn't be more pleased to partner with other organizations that are centered around supporting women and led by women. I think it's very important.
Yeah, Joy?
Well, absolutely. And I mean, we look for companies led by women to rally our cause and to champion our mission. It just makes perfect sense. And the beauty about Dress for Success is that now, 21 years later, many of the women who walked through our door, who came through some incredible circumstances, these are managers, directors, senior level vice presidents today who at some point in their life needed an organization like Dress for Success, but they're no longer in distress. So those same women are the women who are championing our mission and our cause in their corporations. And so it's just beautiful to see women who have been helped, who are now helping others achieve success.
Yeah. All right, next question. Joy, how can other nonprofit brands brand themselves to attract such incredible partnerships like the one Dress for Success has with Talbot's?
You know, I think what we were really smart at in the early days was building a brand, right? So it wasn't just important for us to do the work and to have a mission, but we were equally charged with building our own successful brand that would attract a Talbot's to us. So the fact that we have, 158 plus offices in 28 countries around the world, that's attractive to corporations that are looking to align themselves with a social cause and to make an impact not only in their markets, but all around the world. And so we are as focused as the mission of Dress for Success in building a powerful brand. And that's where my work at Dress for Success over the last 20 years has been about building the brand of Dress for Success and ensuring that everywhere we have our footprint, we're making a difference in women's lives.
And the next question, I think, basically is just the inverse of that. How do for-profit organizations find nonprofits that align with their brand and mission? What are the ingredients of a successful partnership?
I would say that the most important aspect of it is the shared values and the authenticity of the relationship. You can't make it up. You can't ask customers and associates to buy into something that they don't believe in or that you don't believe in. So I think it starts with what are the shared values that we have, and do we truly have the same beliefs, and do we believe by working together that we can do better? And I think that's when it materializes in what I would define as a successful partnership.
But I want you to know, I want Talbot's to win as much as I want Dress for Success to win. Because when Talbot's wins, we win. And so when I see Lizana, the first thing I ask her is, how is Talbot's doing? Right? Because there's a lot of brands out there not doing so well. So I'm there not only shopping in Talbot's, but I'm promoting Talbot's because it is a brand that cares about women. And so that's our relationship. It's a friendship, but it's really a partnership.
It truly is. And I would say that longevity, you have to go at it, and you have to come at it year after year. It's not a moment. It's not a one-time thing that we do. This is something that's ingrained in the organization and has been for 6 years. It takes it's time to build it up and really communicate it well and embrace it and do it well.
All right, let's take a final question from Johanna. For Talbots, how do you manage maintaining your financial commitment to Dress for Success and as the business and its change?
So I think that our commitment to Dress for Success transcends what's happening in our business. And we're a retailer. You guys probably see in the news there's lots of things going on in retail, ups and downs. But really for us, it's so much more than that. So we believe in this relationship, and it's going to be everlasting beyond my work with Talbots. And as Joy said, it's been rooted since decades actually in the business. So I do believe that as an organization, you can transcend what happens every single day in your business. You make choices, you make decisions, and I believe that you can support organizations that do good.
Everyone, please join me in thanking Joy and Lizanna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Five, 4, 3, 2.
What is it that has brought this big family of strangers together?
I created Participant because I believed in the power of storytelling to inspire mass audiences to social change.
The name Participant stands for commitment, passion.
They transcend politics. They're stories about people, and they're stories about issues.
That feeling, that voice that often doesn't get heard.
I think when you see yourself up there on the screen, your story is reflected, and you feel empowered by that.
Participants' work doesn't stop when a film is released. It goes well beyond the life of a film.
They really stand at the intersection of art and activism.
We can't understand the problems, the issues, the day-to-day realities of so many people without stories to help us get closer to those communities.
We always work hand in hand with impact partners whose on-the-ground commitment to these issues is already creating change in the world today.
Partnering with advocacy groups, NGOs, and community organizations, we use art to create a shift in public consciousness.
It's changing the hearts and minds of people who are looking for ways to act.
There is a moment when you have to choose whether to be silent or to stand up.
I'll sit on this end of it.
To discuss films with a cause, please welcome Holly Gordon, Chief Impact Officer at Participant Media, and welcome back to the stage, Allison Stewart.
So Holly, in a 2015 article in Variety, George Clooney is quoted as saying when he heard Participant was going to make movies, socially relevant films, he said, "Good luck with that, we'll see you on PBS." So that's been sort of a common wisdom. Why is that the common wisdom in Hollywood? And I want to point out that Holly's first career was as a journalist. So I'm going to ask you that as an insider and as a journalist. Why has that common wisdom in Hollywood that you can't make socially relevant films that make money?
Well, I think I'm going to first tell a funny story that Jeff Skoll, the founder of Participant, tells, which is when he first came to Hollywood, he met a lot of doubters. And one person said to him, the fastest way from going to be a billionaire to a millionaire is go to Hollywood. So I think it's actually not true that you can't make really commercially viable films that have a social good at the center. Hollywood is a trend-following and trend-making place, both, right? And I think what we're seeing more and more is, and this has been true forever, which is human stories are
compellingly told have an amazing value. And so Participant has sort of stuck to, it's our franchise, if you will, that we tell human stories, we're getting better and better at it, and showing that they have a value in commercial box office.
Participant has made more than 100 feature and documentary films that have earned 73 Academy Award nominations and 18 wins. Practically speaking, how important are those awards in getting these kind of movies made?
They're hugely important. They're hugely important to getting more of them made, and they're also hugely important to having more people see them. So, we are overwhelmed with content choices, and so what awards try to help you do is make those choices easier. So if you don't get to go to the movies very often, and then you see something's winning, and that creates a conversation at the water cooler, you probably are gonna choose that over one you've never heard of. And so, the other part of awards is that making movies is really, really, really hard, and there's an artistry there. And so every community needs to be celebrating artists, and so that's the other really important value to awards. So first is helping the public curate, and then the second is really valuing the enormous leaps of imagination, creativity, and collaboration that it takes to make a movie.
In the end, George Clooney ended up making Good Night and Good Luck.
Yeah, I was going to say, he's in our community, as it were.
And he went on to say, after he said about the PBS quip, Skoll actually showed up and did exactly what he said he wanted to do. That is a pretty rare story in Hollywood. What did he do? What were some of the good decisions that he made that made it possible for Participant to grow and be viable?
So I think that it's Jeff's consistent commitment to the idea that we have a double bottom line, which is that we seek to make films that have commercial appeal, and they always have to have a social impact baked in them. And that consistent commitment on the commercial side provides a lens for decision making that really pushes us towards bridging from sort of the independent film world into the mainstream, and that's an important role that Participant plays. At the same time, we make films that we know might not make money because the value that we see in the storytelling or the impact is more important than a commercial return. And so I think it's the consistent commitment, obviously the hiring of great editorial teams. Diane Wireman is the Chief Content Officer. She's been there for 14, 15 years. It's always a team that makes things possible. So I think those are the two elements, a consistent commitment and a team that really lives its values every day.
Do you think that having a culture like the one that has been created at Participant, we're talking about places and companies that have purpose.
Yeah.
Does it have to be in companies where it's originally part of the company? You've worked at other big places. And sometimes legacy places have a hard time changing and adjusting. Just from your work experience, is that part of why Participant's been able to do this, because it's always been this?
I think that, thank goodness for millennials and Gen Zers. I think that just like in the greater world, culture and demand of everyday people is what sets, the demands of everyday employees is what sets culture. And so I don't think that if your culture has not valued purpose in the past, you can't create systems like, as Tom was talking about this morning, that helps your employees find purpose and that helps your organization find purpose too. And I fundamentally agree with Tom that I think that if you have employees who feel as though they're mission aligned with the purpose of the organization, you get better results across the board. So I do not think that you need to have it baked in originally. We weren't thinking that way 30 years ago. We are thinking that way now because we face an existential crisis as a humanity. We cannot keep extracting. We cannot keep supporting systems that result in deep inequality. We have to choose the future we want to see, and therefore we have to set that as an intention from the very start.
It's a cool job title, Chief Impact Officer.
My mom hated it. She's like, that sounds dangerous. What do you...
How did you come? Can I ask you a little bio? How you came to be Chief Impact Officer?
Yeah. So, I've never planned my career, and someone just sent me a blog post that Mark Andreessen wrote that says you shouldn't plan your career, and oh, well, that's a relief. But I've just, I was a journalist, and one of the fundamentals of being a journalist, you got to be curious, and so I sort of, I had two things that I was really interested. One, I was really interested in diplomacy and foreign policy. The Cold War and nuclear proliferation was my obsession in college, but then I failed the Foreign Service exam. So I ended up going to India with a friend on a journalistic exercise and realized, oh, this is a different kind of diplomacy, foreign policy tool. You can go around the world and discover new places, and hopefully by bringing back understanding, create bridges. So I was curious and interested in foreign policy. I became a journalist. And then I, through a series of events, ended up leading a project called Girl Rising that used the power of storytelling in a major feature-length film and a campaign around it to raise awareness and action around girls' education. Because if you study global development, one of the key ideas that you would come away with is that if you educate girls, everything in a country gets better. So, Girl Rising was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. As a journalist, you might appreciate the fact that we were building a partnership with Intel, and they said, well, can you send us over a PowerPoint? And I was like, what's a PowerPoint? But at Intel, unless it's in a PowerPoint, bridging cultures, it actually doesn't exist as an idea. So I very quickly learned how to do PowerPoints and strategic planning and pitching and conversation, and so that was a sort of baptism by fire building Girl Rising. And really the idea was this central film surrounded by a set of key partners who believed as passionately as we did that girls' education was vital to changing the future of our world, and activating those partners as the film came into the world. And as I was leaving Girl Rising, my big dream was to find a philanthropist who also believes that storytelling is a powerful and underinvested in intervention for change, and to work on behalf of the organizations that do this kind of game-changing work every day, but don't have the resources or the skill set of storytelling, because storytelling is so transformational to sort of making great leaps forward in understanding. And a friend of mine from grade school, actually, who works at a headhunter, sent the job description to me and said, Holly, I read this job description and I thought of you. And I opened it and I was like, dream job. So then I calmed down and went through the process and hoped for the best.
So when you are creating a social impact campaign around one of your films, what are some of the first questions that you ask? And then what are some of the first action items?
So the way I've started to think about our work on our impact team is that if the movie is the what, it's the piece of art that's been created, the impact campaign is all about the why. So why does that piece of content have relevance in the world? Why is this a participant movie? And normally, somebody on the film team holds the answer to the why. Sometimes it's the director, sometimes it's the screenwriter, sometimes in the case of He Named Me Malala, it's the protagonist at the center of the film. We're just making a film called Just Mercy about Brian Stevenson. So we went down to EJI and met with Brian. Brian holds the why in that film. Dark Waters, which we're releasing today, actually. There's a combination of the protagonist in the film is a man named Rob Bilott, the true life hero at the center of the movie. He holds the why, and actually so does Mark Ruffalo, who's a lifetime activist. And so we work with the folks who hold the why to start to knit together a campaign that will bring the power of and the visibility of the film itself and all the marketing dollars that are going to be put behind the film into the communities and into the hands of leaders who can use that film to forward their work.
What's an example of a campaign?
So an example of the campaign is, we can actually talk about the campaign around Roma. where we partnered with Ai-jen Poo, who is the leader of the National Domestic Workers Alliance. She has been fighting for the rights of domestic workers across the United States. They are one of the last remaining populations of workers who have no workplace protections, so no health care, no days off, no sick days, et cetera. And so we worked with her and her organization to use the visibility of Roma to raise the conversation around the rights of domestic workers, both here and in Mexico. And as a result, a new Domestic Workers Bill of Rights has been introduced in Congress. And in Mexico, the day after the Oscars, when the president of Mexico announced his commitment to passing a Domestic Workers Bill of Rights in Mexico, which was enacted in June and is now law, protecting 2.2 million domestic workers across Mexico for the first time in history.
It's amazing.
So that's the power. I've seen this happen twice now, an Oscar win that's actually led to policy change, and I've been working at Participant for 2 years, so that's not a bad track record.
Which is the other?
The other was A Fantastic Woman, which was about gender identity rights. It was the best foreign film. It was made out of Chile, and in Chile you weren't allowed to, if you were transgender, you were not allowed to change your gender on your identification. And in the wake of A Fantastic Woman, Michelle Bachelet, who was then a leader in Chile, pushed that bill through.
I'm going to go to Slido questions in just a few minutes, so get them going. We've talked about Oscar wins, and I have to ask you about, people probably saw in the trailer, one of your big Oscar wins, Best Picture, is very controversial, Green Book. For those of you who don't know, there are a lot of people who felt that Green Book was a story that was not told appropriately, not told through the proper lens. You guys know what Green Book is about, right? Yes? So I just want to read a quote about it from a professor. Said, "That's ultimately why Green Book feels wrong-headed to me, no matter how well-intentioned. The movie clearly exhibits Hollywood's unfortunate tendency to elide reality when making movies about historical racism. It takes the name of an important artifact of history, one whose very existence was a result of prejudiced and entrenched white supremacy, and makes it the basis for a broad comedy." This is a professor at King's College. What kind of conversations went on within Participant about Green Book? What could be learned from Green Book? What could Participant learn from the reaction to Green Book?
So one of the most important parts of the work we do is that our content can be a catalyst for difficult conversations. We are in the midst of a campaign around the film American Factory, which is about inequality of the worker's experience in terms of, we have created a workplace that works for a small percentage of sort of profit makers, and often employees have been left behind. And if you go into an American Factory community conversation, we have management and we have union leaders, and they very rarely sit at the same table, and those conversations are difficult. For us with Green Book, it was obviously a film that the company was a part of and was supportive of and continues to be supportive of. At the same time, it catalyzed a lot of really, really powerful conversations internally and has led to work internally that is, I think, important and timely. I said that we are a part of Just Mercy, and I think that the whole leadership team went down to meet with Brian and visit EJI and the Legacy Museum there. And for those of you who have not been on that journey, it's a life-changing journey. And I think that we're not perfect all the time. We have a tremendous amount to learn always as a company, and in terms of in communities across the country. And so I think Green Book was an example of that.
Part of our evolution. Let's take a question. This is from Jenny, author of Giving Way to Happiness. What role do you think pop culture can play in about bringing social change?
With our product called Shared Purpose.
Well, I think pop culture plays a huge role in driving social change, which makes me super excited when I see pop cultural leaders, people who do have a pop cultural platform. I've mentioned Mark Ruffalo, using that platform to focus the sort of the gaze of celebrity on the issues that matter and on the folks who don't receive that kind of visibility for the work that they do. I think it's vital, and I feel as though that's the world in which participant is playing. I sometimes call it Starbucksifying issues, right? So you take something that's not in the mainstream and you make it into a sort of worthy of a coffee conversation.
Since we've mentioned the Mark Ruffalo movie a couple of times, it's today's the release. Today's
yes,
they're
down on the hill right now.
So we have a little bit of the trailer.
I thought we were
Let's
too.
play a little bit of the trailer.
Like this, A Street Full of Splendid Strangers.
I haven't read that.
How many did you lose?
190.
190 cows.
You tell me nothing's wrong here.
It's a small matter for a family friend. Help a guy who needs it.
The farmer or you? That's chemicals, I'm telling you.
I'm seeing documents I don't understand. They're hiding something. That chemical. What if you drank it?
Drink it? It's like saying, what if I swallowed a tire?
What if whatever's killing those cows is in the drinking water?
Which actually, that was pretty good. Yeah, I love that. I don't. Yeah.
Well, and actually, what is the campaign that goes with Dark Waters?
They're like the implementation partner.
So, at the heart of the campaign,
instead of building it themselves,
around Dark Waters is it's pulled from a line in the film that you don't see in this trailer, but it's in the longer version, which is the idea that we protect us, that we as community members must demand protection from forever chemicals. So at the heart of Dark Waters is the manufacture of Teflon, and Teflon is made from PFAS, which is like eating tires. It is a chemical compound that never goes away. All of you have PFAS in your blood, and it's a known carcinogen. And we have been working with the Environmental Working Group and others to raise awareness both at the level of national leadership. So we're in Congress. There is no mistake that we are launching this campaign on Capitol Hill with a set of meetings today and testimony before Congress about PFAS and forever chemicals. And our expectation is that our EPA protects us from these kind of hazardous chemicals in our daily lives. And we're going into communities that have been most deeply affected by PFAS to raise awareness of that very, very localized fight for protection for the health of our families and our children.
Can you share something that's in the pipeline? A film or project?
So let me think. So Just Mercy is the next major release, and that's coming out over the holidays. And again, I recommend all of you go and see that film. Brian Stevenson is a national hero.
Read the book too.
Read the book. The book is life-changing. The movie is fabulous. The book is obviously a more complete story. Take your children, take anyone you care about, start to understand the legacy and history on which our systems have been built. And Brian and his work can take you through that. And then in March, we are 2020 election year. We have a really exciting film coming out called Slay the Dragon. For those of you who don't know anything about gerrymandering, what I'm going to tell you is it's the most important thing you know nothing about. For those of you who do, you will share my enthusiasm for a film that makes gerrymandering both really understandable and really urgent as a rigged system that that's getting in the way of representative democracy. Now is the time. Gerrymandering is linked to the 2020 census, and we have a 5-state campaign to raise awareness about in gerrymandered states to try to fix this for the next 10 years. So those are my 2 shout-outs, Just Mercy and Slay the Dragon.
Holly Gordon, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Yep.
For a session produced by our underwriter, please welcome Megan Brown, Senior Vice President and Chief Development Officer at the United Way of New York City, and Jennifer Dunn, Senior Vice President of Stakeholder Communications at Wells Fargo.
Thank you. You guys hear me okay? This feels awkward.
Yeah.
I feel like Britney Spears.
And they warned us not to trip on the stairs, but I almost did it anyway.
Right.
So,
well, welcome. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm Jennifer Dunn, Head of Public Affairs Communications at Wells Fargo. We're super excited to be here this year. This is the 3rd year we've sponsored this event. Every year I learn something, and I'm hoping today through our session together, we can help you learn something as well. So I'm here with Megan Brown, as the voiceover noted, is the head of Chief Development Officer of United Way here in New York City. And United Way and Wells Fargo have a very long partnership together. We have been partnering in some form or fashion since 1880, so 140 years of partnership. That's my longest relationship ever, for sure, 100%. But I wanted to, hello?
are we still there? Well, I'll jump in for a minute. We are so delighted and proud of the partnership that we have with Wells Fargo, both globally and here in New York, that has just meant a world to our community. Wherever we are, we know that we have an amazing relationship with Wells Fargo. And our job at United Way really is to be that connector between the corporate community back to our local communities, having true sustainable impact, and making sure that we do that in the best ways that we can and in the most innovative ways. So we're really, really lucky.
So thank you. I have no mic, so can someone in the back help us? I know. There's a article. Isn't it time? Hopefully they'll get my mic fixed. I'm sorry if you cannot hear me. So we want to talk a little bit today about purpose in action. So how organizations can partner with the United Way and others. Thank you. Thank you. This is much more comfortable. How organizations can partner with the United Way and others to really take advantage of employees who want to be involved. Employees who are looking for more of a sense of purpose in their work and what they do. And the Edelman Trust Barometer recently found that 2/3 of employees are looking for more of a purpose at work, and in fact they will base their job choices on organizations that they feel help them serve a purpose. So Megan, from your chair, can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of trends in employee engagement and volunteerism?
Absolutely. We're really excited about the future, and we're really excited that we sit in a place to really be able to leverage what the good that is in this room as one example. What we're seeing is that overall, the number of people who give annually has gone down a little bit, but the amount that is being given has increased significantly. $410 billion last year were given to charitable causes. It's an incredible testament to what our community can do. But what we also know from where United Way sits and our 100+ years of really being a social responsibility partner to our corporate partners is that employees want their companies to care about the community. Employees want to work somewhere. You all know this. This is why we're here. They want to work somewhere where they know that that is a pure focus. It is up there with the profit. And that you have an execution partner in United Way to help you do that is really where we feel and can see that, that companies are having real traction when it comes to employee engagement. And employees don't want to just engage one time a year. We see incredible days of volunteering that are the capstone to a year-round, engagement, where people are volunteering throughout the year, being engaged in their communities, wherever they might be, in ways that really feel that they can understand what the impact is. And Wells Fargo is a wonderful example of where we've recently done and rethought about an innovative day of giving to truly be that capstone, but where employees, and what we're really hearing is that employees want to feel it every day in everything they do, want it to be part of their messaging, and we really need to be that kind of partner to our corporations to be able to do that efficiently and effectively.
Yeah. Well, and we really have a very vocal, what we call team member population. We have 260,000 people around the world. They are not shy. They tell us what they want, and even when we don't ask them. But we took the opportunity to ask them a couple years ago when we recognized that we have very, very passionate team members in terms of and very generous team members in terms of the amount that they're willing to give. But they really wanted more. They wanted to be recognized for their time, for their board service, and for their engagement across the board in general with organizations. So we worked with the United Way and we revamped our team member giving program. So essentially we launched what we call the Community Care Grants program, where team members have their donations matched, but they also have their volunteer time matched. Team members at Wells Fargo get 2 days of paid holiday a year to go volunteer. So we award them, and we award the organizations of their choosing for their service, as well as their donations. And that's been a really popular program. In fact, we saw that our previous program was being used by actually a very small percentage of the team member population. And we really wondered why, and we wanted to make sure people were more engaged. And there were some very unhappy people, frankly, who were giving a lot of money to a very small number of educational institutions. But we decided that it was more important for us to really reconsider how we could engage our team member population overall and harness that passion and help them feel more engaged in what we were doing as a company. And so when you're working with organizations like Wells Fargo and probably many of the companies in this room, how important is it for you in your success as a company? I think you did 160 events just in New York City last year at the United Way. So how important is it for you all to have partners in companies like Wells Fargo and other organizations?
So this is the core of what we do. And it is about bringing together our corporate partners where there really is community need. It is United Way's responsibility in every community that we're in to understand truly what is happening in that community and be able to respond to it effectively, help you respond to it effectively. It is our job to do that efficiently for you. And so many of the things that we see are companies, people within companies, really wanting to make sure that they have an outlet to do that. One of the things that United Way has put at the core of our business value going forward, and we have done this on both a global and a local perspective, is really about purpose. We have a product called Shared Purpose. It's about going into our corporate partners and being a business advisor to you. What are your companies saying that what are your employees saying that they want in their company? How do we help survey that? Here in New York, we work with Wells Fargo, McKinsey, many other companies who are in the room today to really be able to understand both what your employees want and what the company needs to be effective, and how you marry that with where there really is need in the community, how you are responding effectively to where there is need. And having 160 volunteer projects a year, many of which we've done with folks around this room, just in New York City, that's great, but there's so much more that we can do together. And when we think about each nonprofit that those volunteer projects help serve, each family, each face that's behind that, we know we have a lot more work to do, and that we're on the road to do that with really incredible partnerships. And it all starts with listening. It starts with listening to Wells Fargo when we sit down together and say, what do you want to accomplish this year? How do you want your employee engagement to look and feel? Let's do that in partnership with United Way. Let's measure it. Let's make sure we're being effective. And then let's do it again next year and have even more impact.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very consistent with what we heard earlier from the folks at Talbot's Address for Success. Absolutely. That Wells Fargo gives away we will have given away $444 million in 2018. We're the country's largest corporate cash donor, which many people don't know. So FYI. But we are executing on delivering that value and having that impact in large part through partners like the United Way. You know, we can't be experts in volunteerism and how to implement a great volunteer policy. We can do what we think we can. We want to listen to our team members, but it really does take partnership with organizations, especially when you have, we had, I think, about 100,000 team members last year give 2 million hours. In terms of their time. So in order to be as successful as we can be and have the impact we want, it really pays to take advantage of a partnership like this. And we heard that earlier with Talbot's and Dress for Success as well.
Absolutely.
So our time is up, actually. We are 22 seconds away. So I just want to say thank you, Megan, for your time. Thank you all for having us. And we hope you learned a little bit from the session today.
Thank you.
And now, please welcome Marianne Hancock, CEO of Y Analytics, here with journalist Jean Meserve.
Great to be here with all of you, and particularly with you, Marianne.
It's okay, great to be here as well.
So first, let's do some definitions. What is impact investing?
Can someone help me? That's actually a big space. But impact investing.
Linda's coming back so we can take a picture. It was great. Thank you. I didn't have time to ask you a question. I mean,
we are having a microphone problem.
Oh, okay. There we go. Now we're back.
Okay,
We'll try that again.
Yes, now we can hear you. Impact investing.
Impact investing is taking your capital and directing it towards good at the biggest, simplest level. There can be lots of different variations of that. It can be making sure that the capital that you have, the investments you're making, are doing no harm. That's a big step forward. It can be making sure that companies that you're investing in or that the companies themselves are producing their goods in the best possible way with the lowest carbon footprint or with the best supply chain practices. Or it can be one of the most exciting parts of this, investing in bringing capital to companies where the output of what they do is actually good for the world. So that's healthcare or education or clean energy.
So Y Analytics, what does it do? How does it interface with impact investing?
So the Y basically means we bring research and capital together for good. That's the basics of this. And what that means is that there are thousands of people out in the world every day who are experts and really spend their whole lives studying how to make good happen in the world. So how to help increase maize productivity in a healthful way in sub-Saharan Africa, or how to include people from financial products that help formerly unbanked people save, or scientists who understand truly how to reduce the carbon footprint. So what we do is we help to tap into all of those people and their research and bring that to corporations or investors who are trying to make better decisions.
That information was not available to them before?
It's not so much as not available, it's that it's hard to access. And if you think about many people who are dealing with finances, investing, corporations every day, that's not their job in some ways. It's not their skill set. And so our team, for example, is looking at dense economic papers and understanding and reading all the detail of the science behind something and then translating that in a way. So much of it is actually publicly available data and information, but it's not easy to access.
How confident are you in the quality of the data that you're pulling together and then disseminating to
Actually,
others?
we spend a lot of time assessing the quality of it because frequently it can range quite widely. It has been truly inspiring to see how much research and data is available, though. So starting point is there's a lot out there that can be tapped. And as companies, by the way, start to disclose more and more information about what they're doing, partly because they are forced to and partly because they want to, there's even more data that can be used. So one piece is there's a lot out there that can be tapped. But there are always issues with that data. And so a lot of the work we do is to understand how trustable it is, and then to actually give it a score to say, how do we use this with confidence?
And as you pull this data together, do you discover that there are gaps, that there are areas that have not been adequately studied? And what are you doing to fill those gaps?
There are gaps, and they're important gaps. And the exciting thing is that there are institutions all over the world who are trying to fill those gaps. So one, for example, has to do with natural capital. That is the idea that there is actually value, and how do we place a value on our forests, on our coral reefs, on those aspects of the environment that are nature. So Stanford and the Natural Capital Project and many others around the world are dedicating research now to that.
So the metrics in this can be kind of tricky, I imagine. So for instance, if you're studying microloans, if a woman, for instance, replaces the mud floor in her home with a wooden floor, that's not going to show up in a country's GDP, and yet it's doing good. So how do you account for things like that?
Well, first of all, you're not going to accomplish all of it. You're not going to capture all of it. And part of what we do is try to understand what the major pathways are, the material pathways for good or bad impact. So we have to admit from the start that this is an imprecise. It is imprecise, but it gives us directionally more information about how to make a good decision. So that's one important caveat. But one of the things that is really interesting is that a lot of the research that's out there is looking at micro advances. And so some of you may be aware that the recent Nobel laureates this year in economics actually are dedicated to this field. And so maybe I can bring it to life with an example from some of their early work. They were looking at healthcare and education in sub-Saharan Africa, actually in Kenya. And one of the things they were trying to figure out is what were the things that could keep kids in school and what were some of the impacts of that. Well, things that might intuitively be good, like providing kids uniforms, providing kids books to go to school, also providing them with deworming medication so that they weren't sick and they could actually go to school. All of those actually work. All of those actually help kids stay in school. But for about $1,100 is what it costs to have the effect of 1 year of school for kids if you invest them in free uniforms. For that same $1,100, you could get about 132 years of school. They both work, but one works substantially better. And so there's actually research that gets into that level of detail. Now, it doesn't cover everything in the world, but leveraging that is a really exciting place to be.
And I suppose another factor would be, is it better to affect a few people deeply or a lot of people not so much, but some?
Well, the answer is it's not better either way. It's both. And that's part of why we magnitude. That's part of why we get into the metrics. Not because you can value everything in this world, but because by doing that exercise, you can understand the magnitude. The lose situation is when you are affecting a few people at a very shallow level, right? So understanding the depth, the breadth, the longevity, the short term versus near term or versus long term. Are you educating someone today, or are you investing in a life sciences product that will help people in 10 years? Understanding all those dimensions through what we do is bring that research and value that impact allows you to make that informed decision.
Right now, how much investment is impact investment?
Well, the GIN, which is the organization, the body that really is sort of in this industry space, would say it's about $500 billion, which in the concept of trillions of dollars that are invested globally every year is a drop in the bucket. But it's still substantial and growing. One of the things that's really important and interesting in that is that a fair amount of that is actually through development banks, development and government-related institutions, and then some of that, a smaller fraction that is private. That's at the narrowest version of impact investing. There are much broader versions, and so you may be familiar with aspects of investing which screen out companies that might have behaviors or be producing products that you don't like. Right? That is a much broader pool of capital at this point.
So one presumes that investors make investments to make money. And one of the popular preconceptions has been that impact investing isn't going to make as much.
Right.
Is that accurate?
That's actually not accurate. What is true is that there's a spectrum of issues, and then in terms of the capital that needs to be allocated to them and the returns that you can get. So if you're investing in a company where the output of the company is the good that you're trying to create, it is more patients served or more students educated, then the better the company does at its impact, the better it does at its finances. Now, that allows for market rate of return types of returns. Now, that's not going to solve every problem in the world. There still is need for concessional or catalytic capital, which does come at either a longer time horizon or a slightly different market rate, return rate. And there is still important roles for government and philanthropy. So in other words, there's a spectrum of this, but it's actually false at this point that you can't make a return.
I presume that one of your goals in producing this data is to persuade more investors to do impact investing. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely.
Is it working?
Yes, it is. And what we see is that it's coming from a number of different sources. Part of it is that people can make more confident decisions if these type of metrics and this type of research is available. It's also coming from the fact that the large institutional investors around the world, particularly in Europe and Asia, but also now here in the US, are calling for this. It's also happening when employees are asking for their companies to make more impactful decisions. So we are part of what I'd say is a whole movement that's helping to bring capital to these spaces.
So it is changing the definition of return on investment?
Yes, it is, absolutely. That can take form of, people often refer to it as a double or triple bottom line. There's a lot of different ways to think about that, but it is recognizing that the good of the investment is critical to the future of our world, and also that is critical to the future of the financial stability of that company.
So I watch television and I see ads from the big oil companies saying, we're making green investments. And the skeptic in me is going, oh yeah.
Right.
Is there a lot of that going on, so-called impact washing?
Right. So part of what our whole purpose is to help avoid or do away with impact washing by making transparent what actually is happening in companies and in investments. There is a lot of it. And that's not to say it's specific just to the oil companies. By the way, some of them are making good investments. The question is, how does that net out across the entirety of a company, any company? The focus on it is calling upon companies to think about this more holistically, and therefore to bring forward more facts about what they're doing.
And is it changing behaviors by the companies?
I think
we
it
talked
is,
about how
yes.
it's changing investor behavior, but is it changing company
It is. I think that we have a long way to go, for sure. But again, when you have the triumvirate of employees, customers, and investors clamoring for this, that actually aligns incentives. And if you think about this, most of my career was actually working with corporations as opposed to with investors. A lot of people want to do the right thing. And if you align the incentives across those three groups of employees, customers, and investors, it allows people to do the right thing.
Please submit your questions for Marianne versus via Slido, if you would. So you're 1 year into this project. Has it made a difference?
Yeah. One of the really most privileged things I get to do, I love my job, is to see the companies that are actually invested in grow and come to life. And so the genesis of Winalytics was spun out of the RISE Fund, which is a $2.1 billion fund, and now they're raising their second fund, to invest in companies, both in emerging markets in the US, where the output is socially and environmentally good. This was originally founded by TPG and Bono and Jeff Skoll. And to see these companies and what they're doing in the world is the most invigorating thing. These are companies, again, that are creating life sciences solutions so that we can have non-surgical ways of removing glaucoma. Think about the impact for that of people around the world who can't access surgery. It's hospitals. It is incredible technology that helps kids learn math in a much more personalized way. So to see these companies and to be able to be part of bringing the impact story to life and testing it and making sure that investments that shouldn't be made are not made is incredibly exciting.
Dan asks a great question. Are there any examples of impact investing where the outcomes were not as good as investors hoped? What have you and other impact investors learned from past missteps?
Yes, there are. And I think what we've learned is that, first of all, a healthy dose of humility is good in many walks of life. This is one of them. And part of the reason is because impact is simply not intuitive. You can't sit here in New York and understand what is going to have impact in Nairobi. It just doesn't work that way. And that's why we try to contribute to that evolution, to avoid the mistakes by turning to third-party research. We don't get to make up what impact is and what qualifies, nor should the investor or the company. So yes, there absolutely are missteps, and there will be more, by the way. And so bringing as much rigor to those decisions as we can is critically important.
In the past, it has been largely intuitive, hasn't it? It's what people felt in their guts.
Right.
I think this is going to do
And
good.
by the way, the word intentionality is something that is both a real good, but it also can be a limiting if we stop at intent. Intent allows for some intuition. I want to do good. Well, let's test that. We should have confidence. The billions of dollars that are being invested at this point, the trillions of dollars that are invested around the world globally, we should have a lot more confidence, just like we would make any financial decision, about what those underlying assumptions are about the impact we're going to have.
Another question, how do you evaluate impact before you invest? What are the best predictors of success?
Sure. So anyone who's familiar with a financial analysis that you would do upfront of any type of project, a capital expenditure project, an investment, it's actually not that dissimilar from that. What we're doing is we're taking the company, we're looking at the company, and we're identifying what are the pathways of impact, positive or in some cases negative. Maybe they have, maybe producing their product actually has environmental effects that are detrimental, right? We need to think about those. So we take a look at the company, we look at the pathways for positive and negative impact, and then we turn to third-party research to understand what's the closest analog to the change that company is going to have, the experience that their beneficiaries are going to have, and what's the value of that based on third-party research.
Great. Thank you so much, Marianne Hancock, CEO of Y Analytics.
Great. Thanks
for being with us.
Great to see you all.
Thank you.
For a conversation about corporate advocacy, please welcome Lisa Boyd, Senior Manager of Social Impact at Lyft, Susan McPherson, Founder and CEO of McPherson Strategies, and Carlene Pickard, Ethical Campaign Specialist at Lush Cosmetics. To lead the conversation, welcome back the Atlantic's Jillian White.
Hello.
I can't read.
So it wasn't. How are you doing on the seats?
Yeah, that's how I feel. Lily Tomlin always.
It was not that long ago that the idea of a company saying anything about politics, coming out with an overt political statement, or responding to a question about its political beliefs was almost unheard of. Corporations often acted like being political was something they would stay as far away as possible from. And now it feels like you literally cannot get them to be quiet about their political beliefs and the things that they want to be involved in and have their hands in. Susan, when did that change?
When did that change? I think it was about 6 years ago. LGBTQ activism was kind of the first, the first foray into taking stands. And then when marriage equality became kind of an issue and an important issue, we saw companies stepping up, and companies you would not typically expect. Dow Chemical, Delta Airlines, et cetera, Disney. And then when the president pulled out of Paris, you saw 700 companies literally step up and say, we're still in. One shocking statistic there, Tiffany & Co., the company, 176 years old, they took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal stating, we're still in. And now, most recently we saw companies stepping up to fight gun violence, and last summer we saw 350 companies step up to fight the abortion bans in a variety of southern states. Yeah. So I think you're right that it's...
Why do you think that LGBTQ rights, that marriage equality was the thing that turned the tide for a lot of companies? Why do you think that was kind of an inflection point?
I think it was a lot of work. Activists really kind of raised the issue, and I think there came kind of a reckoning where everyone realized they know someone who is gay, whether it's their sibling or cousin or coworker, then it became a business issue, because if you had, say, Microsoft wanting to hire a couple that was married in one state and move them to another state that they could not be married, it created major issues. So you had people going to their public policy leaders and to the government, and then we saw the Supreme Court make the big change.
Yeah. Carlene and Lisa, Lush and Lyft, respectively, have taken some stances on issues and have been pretty vocal about their support. Trans rights is one of them for Lush. LGBTQ issues is one of them for Lyft. I'm wondering, how do these companies think about what they are going to kind of put their voice and intention and time behind?
Yeah. We have really strong values as a company, and two of those are be yourself and uplift others. And so when we're thinking about the work that we're doing, we're thinking about how it ties into those values, how it affects our internal community, our employees, as well as our drivers and our riders. And so immigration is an issue that has hit those communities very hard. LGBTQ rights is another one that we've heard a lot from our respective communities. So we're thinking about opportunities to use our voice in a meaningful way. We're also thinking about opportunities to use transportation. Every way that we think about our impact is through how transportation can make a difference. And so when we think about those initiatives, we're thinking about where transportation can play a role. So with immigration, we've been providing rides through lots of local nonprofits to get people to and from legal appointments, to getting picked up at the border when they're crossing. So lots of opportunities for using transportation to make a meaningful impact. So we're not just using our voice, we're also thinking about how it ties into our core business.
Yeah, I really love the stuff that Lyft did around Hurricane Harvey as well in Houston. I think it was really important. So at Lush, I think we make our decisions around issues in three ways. One is our leadership likes to shine light on issues that might not be an issue that other companies want to take on. So in 2017, we, as a business, because we were asked by organizations to do this, called for the abolition of the death penalty. So really excited to hear about Just Mercy coming out and knowing it's going to be amazing. We also try to figure out where Lush can be engaged in an issue that will leave the issue stronger than it was before we actually got engaged in it. And then thirdly, and I think we've heard a lot about this morning, we routinely ask our staff. So because we have 250 stores in North America, it's this amazing range of being able to see not only what people are thinking in the communities where our stores are, but what really matters to staff.
I'm wondering, when it comes to staff, again, a few years ago, the idea of your staff being politically active, the idea of welcoming activists and people who call themselves activists in your ranks and for them to promote their causes and how they thought things should be handled was pretty scary for a lot of corporations, and I think pretty actively shunned. I'm wondering how you all manage the balance of obviously encouraging people to think and feel passionately about something, which I think is something we can all consider activism, and then also manage kind of the corporate top-down need to be able to control the narrative or to think really intentionally about what being active in a particular issue could mean for a brand or its execution.
I think the successful companies have not tried to control their employees' narratives. I think that you're running a slippery slope, since they all have the means to use their own voice. And I do think, as much as we see companies pushing forward on all these issues that they would never have done before, they're still fundamentally conservative. But the minute you start trying to clamp down on people's enthusiasm, guess what happens? And so I think, if anything, what you want to do, and the companies that have been successful at this, create a safe space in their companies where people feel they can voice their opinions.
What are some companies that you think have been successful at that?
Well, I think Google has done a very good job. I mean, they have listened to their employees when they were, maybe caught not doing something that their employees felt very positive about. We just saw Wayfair, the employees literally staged a walkout when it was found that the company was selling beds to ICE at the border. And I think when you look at, say, Nike and how Nike responded about a year ago to allegations of not paying women as equal as men, and also some sexual harassment, they immediately stepped up and got rid of the problematic employees. But also, when they literally supported Colin Kaepernick and his entire cause, it was very much rooted in their employees and what their employees wanted.
Yeah. Part of what you're talking about is also kind of internal reaction to company policies, but I think with respect to employees and what they want to take action on in the world, we think about differentiating what we address and how we support our community internally from what we do externally. Sometimes they do mirror one another, but sometimes they're different. So when we think about how we act externally, it's always, is there a way for transportation in particular to make an impact in this space? So there are points where we are able to act in that way, and there are points where transportation can't play a role, in which case, what is our voice in that, and why are we taking a stance on it, and does our community want to hear from us in that way? Maybe not our external community. That doesn't mean that internal employees do not, and so we take those apart, and so sometimes things that we aren't able to address publicly because perhaps we don't have a right to as a company because we don't have a stake in that game, we do talk to our employees about that, and we host conversations. We'll work with our employee resource groups to ensure that everybody feels safe and supported within the workplace, even if the company isn't taking a stance publicly on something.
See, and that is so important.
I think this is one of the things I love about these conversations is because so many different brands, even if whatever umbrella you want to put over the brands that do take action or political stances, I find so many of us do it really differently. So, you know, at Lush, we've founded on being a campaigning company from our folks in the UK and have been in the United States or in North America figuring out what's the best way to localize or make more relative the issues that we talk about. So we do, you know, we do our campaigning externally, and we do campaign on the same issues internally. And I think that sometimes is so far from the way that Lyft talks about transportation. I mean, we make soap and bath lotions and body care. So,
but
you know,
soap.
We can do, and I mean, you know, you can look at our sustainability efforts or our ethical buying efforts, but on the campaigning stuff, you know, we'll sort of go beyond, can we get soap to the immigration detention centers or the resettlement? You know, the folks from the International Rescue Committee are here, and we kind of constantly, since our work with them in 2016, have been figuring out how we get soap everywhere. But a lot of the issues that we work on are super distant from what you might think a soap company does. Again, the death penalty or trans rights being some of those examples.
I'm wondering, can you spell out for us, what does listening to your staff and your employees when it comes to issues they want you to be active on, what does that look like? What's the process?
So we have a pretty, as I'm learning, talking to other people, like a pretty in-depth conversation with our staff. We meet with folks fairly frequently, bring people together. We still really believe in that face-to-face communication. But people are consistently polled on the question, what do you think the next issue is that Lush should work on? And they're right. Like the things that I will see being one of the most predominant issues coming up for staff, if we kind of get down, work on it, take about 6 to 10 months to develop a campaign with the right nonprofit partners. When that campaign kind of comes out or goes public, it is a thing that people want to talk about.
Yeah. So I do want to let the audience know, again, we will be taking questions at the end of this. So if you can start breaking out your phones and getting onto Slido and putting those questions in so we can get to as many as possible. So Lyft has said they like to call themselves a woke company, and a lot of the policies and campaigns that you talked about would reflect some level of wokeness. But I'm wondering how Lyft thinks about engaging in things that directly affect its business, such as work and labor rights, where there's obviously some fraud and contention there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that we think about our business is all related to access. So on the ride side of things, we're thinking about how we are tackling unique and specific use cases to get people to a job interview, the grocery store, you know, places where it can be really meaningful. On the driver side of things, we're thinking about access to flexible work. I can speak for myself in having waited tables a lot in my life and bartended. It's really frustrating to not have an opportunity to kind of come in and out of work if you're job searching, if you're working part-time on something. And 91% of our drivers drive less than 20 hours a week. 96% say flexibility is the most important thing for them. So the way that we're thinking about that kind of driver side of things in conversations with labor is to think about how we can provide that access while also providing additional kind of support and benefits to our drivers. So it's kind of an ongoing conversations, but the current model around labor doesn't kind of fit a flexible work schedule and kind of the flexibility of the gig economy, which is really, really integral to why people want to be part of it.
Susan, I'm wondering, do you think this moment where companies are coming out, being incredibly active, are really getting behind both in communication and in terms of monetary giving, et cetera, really getting behind kind of big stances and big moments, do you think this is a trend, or do you think this is here to stay?
I personally think it's here to stay, and I think that's because the world is so interconnected. We used to think that business only looked after business in this country, so when something happened internationally, didn't need to pay attention. We are entering a time where climate is going to affect every part of every one of our lives. We have 88.5 million displaced people on this planet, and people have lost trust with traditional pillars of power, whether it be our political systems or our houses of worship. So we are looking to these new areas for guidance for some sort of moral values. And I think unless all those other things I mentioned go away, I think we're going to still see it. But I do think that puts an onus on companies to be studying the issues, and it's a big responsibility, right? Where you have to think, no matter what the Business Roundtable says, you still have to think about your bottom line.
Charlie.
So yeah, I think I agree with you on that.
Good.
I think our philosophy has always been that we have a platform. So we have our stores in North America and around the world, and we also have our digital channels. And our thing has been definitely to research the issues, but also to partner with organizations who have been doing the work for the longest time, and partner with organizations that you trust, and to ensure that, like I was saying before, ensure that the movement's stronger than when we got involved, because the way that we'll do some of the campaigns will be public-facing for a week or 10 days, and then after that we kind of step back, like we stay active, but you don't see it in our windows anymore. So while we have that period of time, while we have millions of customers coming through the doors and seeing stuff online, we want to make sure that they're directed to the organizations that do the work in the long run and are actually the experts.
Yeah, and you mentioned IRC, for instance.
Right.
If I could just interject, though, another reason we're going to see this continue growing is younger people. Gen Z is also showing the same kind of purpose-driven desires that the millennials did when they came out of college and graduate school. So they are going to want to work for companies that are going beyond the bottom line, that have something beyond whatever product that they're making. So as long as that there's this resurgence and customers who want to buy from companies that they perceive to be doing the right thing, I think it's going to be well into the future.
To that point, I'm wondering how much are both of your companies thinking about the bottom line and consumers, and the fact that consumers more and more want to support and put their money towards businesses that they can feel good about buying into. How much are you guys thinking about that when you make decisions about what to support? Lisa?
I think one of the ways where I've seen companies be most successful in corporate responsibility is when the way that they act is tied to the business. So we're not necessarily thinking about the bottom line in the way that we're doing it, but we are thinking about how it ties into the business and how it ties into our unique ability to affect change, which is why, again, we kind of always focus on that transportation aspect. But what we heard in the talk this morning, I think, was talking about how companies are sometimes taking credit for work that is not meaningful or not sustained. I think it's okay to get credit for the work if the work is good and the work is sustained and the work is impactful. So we launched a number of programs in the last couple of years. Two of our biggest ones are our Grocery Access Program and our Jobs Access Program, respectively providing rides to grocery stores for people who live in food insecure areas, and then folks to get to job interviews, job trainings in the first few weeks of their work. We're thinking about and investing in third-party research next year to prove the validity and importance of these programs and to actually understand the nuance of how transportation can have an impact so that we can then ensure that we are doing them right and sustaining them. So I think it's okay to get that business bottom line credit if the work that you're doing is meaningful and actually helping the world, and then it can be a win-win for everyone.
Really?
I think because we were founded by activists in the UK and the way that that's translated over to North America, there's been less concern about figuring out how to measure. I mean, I know Tom this morning spoke about measurements and and I was like, oh, we don't really do that, but
you can fake it.
But we have increasingly been, I think, just recognizing, and some of it's anecdotal, but some of it you can sort of add up to people who appreciate what we're doing on social, or will be more likely to talk to their friends about the brand because of some of the ethical stances we take on things. We have some of those metrics now, but for us, really, it just has been baked in from the beginning. And for as much as there's the, how do you give other organizations or other companies like courage to take this stand? It just really does work for us. Yeah. Has proven it time and time again.
All right, let's take a few audience questions. From Amos. Lisa, is the gig economy compatible with living wages? Juno, the most driver-centric rideshare company, just shut down today. Can Lyft sustain itself and pay drivers well?
Yes, I definitely believe so. I'm not super familiar with what happened with Juno, so I can't speak to that. But as I alluded to earlier, I think we have a whole team focused on the future of work and what that could look like and what a new model looks like, because current employment is not set up for flexibility and not set up for today's workforce and the way the gig economy has risen. And so I think part of it will be really working towards a new middle ground that is not independent contractor versus employment. It is kind of a middle ground that actually works for today's industries. And that is where I think we can be really successful. But that's something that we need to work together with labor and government to get to that point. And we have whole teams working on how to make that possible.
So the next question is, do employees always support the stances that the company makes? And I guess I would tack onto that, what happens when employees disagree with a stance that the company has taken? Is there room for that type of dissent?
Yeah, so I think in this question, it kind of relates to the death penalty as well. We have had, when we launched that campaign, and as we've done actually with all of our campaigns, there's sort of an internal conversation about what we would do if somebody doesn't agree with the issue. So we have, some pieces in place for that, and that is certainly, based on, we're not going to encourage or force people to do something or say something that they don't believe in or they don't want to do. But we believe we have the opportunity to help people get to the place that we're at. If they don't, that's totally fine. But in a workplace, to be able to talk about the pros and cons of the death penalty, and to be able, I have heard dozens of people who work for the business who changed their perspective, having gone through the campaign we did, and that alone, I think, is a giant win for the movement. But very clearly, we would never force people to either do or say something they don't believe.
Sure. And I think that, when we see companies making these major statements, they've done a ton of research on public opinion polling first. I mean, when Dick's Sporting Goods was heroic in my mind to, stop selling assault weapons, it came after public opinion in this country has been moving away from the ownership of those guns. So, and we see death penalty, is starting. People aren't as pro-death penalty as they were at one point in time. So I think that you're always going to have people who disagree. I mean, that's just the nature of life.
Mm-hmm. So I think this next question is for you, Lisa, and it gets kind of at that tension that I was mentioning before, where you have a company that is trying to do good or focusing on one area, but consumers or the public is really, really concerned about what they are doing or not doing in another area. So the question is, Lyft is being sued by women who say Lyft didn't do enough to protect them from sexual assault. What role does protecting passengers play in Lyft's purpose?
It's a huge role. Safety has been a number one priority for Lyft from the very beginning. We have launched a whole new, a ton of new features in the last few months, including a first of its kind partnership with ADP. Something that I'm personally really proud of is that we just built together with Rain a driver training program that is mandatory for all drivers to take before they're allowed to continue on the platform. So there's a lot happening, and there's a whole team within Lyft focused on that, and it's absolutely part of our purpose, but it's a tough situation, and we're working on it actively.
Do you all think of activism in those areas where historically you've either been weak or there have been lawsuits or there's just been something that comes up that says like, hey, maybe this is a blind spot? How do you think about then including that into the role of kind of campaigns or activism that you're doing?
Do you mean internally or externally?
I think both. Like in a world where you are very involved in the immigration debate, but there is a wage debate that is coming from the public, or there is a conversation about sexual assault or women's rights and how Lyft is or is not being responsive to that. Do you then think about making that kind of a public public-facing platform where you're going to put time and effort and investment?
Yeah, I think we are. We are constantly thinking about how we're getting the messages out about the work that we're doing internally. As many of you in this room possibly know, it's hard to kind of toot your own horn and talk about the work that you're doing. And so we're trying to find the right platforms to get out there and talk about how we're envisioning kind of new models of work for this new and ever-changing workforce. We're trying to get there and out there and talk about all that we're doing on safety and how that how it actually works internally and how we respond to everything that comes in through our doors and how safety is a top priority for us. But that requires people to listen. And so it is definitely something we're working on. But it's not always something that people are receptive to listening to be honest.
Carly, did you have a quick response to that?
Yeah, just quickly, whenever we've done the research on the campaigns, it is also internally, so we're looking at what we're doing.
Yep.
So when we talked about trans rights in 2018, part of the conversation was with all of our trans and gender nonconforming staff to see what we could do better as a business. So at the end of our campaigns, or I guess at the launch of them really, like we are a better company internally because of doing the work so we can talk about something externally.
Well, we could be up here all day, and I know you all want lunch, so we will end there. Please join me in thanking our panel.
And thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please enjoy lunch. We'll see you back here at 1:30 with business leaders from Tom's, L'Oreal, Sweetgreen, and Walmart.